All right, so we've got a good crowd online. Just a couple of very quick housekeeping type items. So Jim, thanks very much, especially now. Really excited to have you here to kick off the Analytic Stories series. And we've got about 30 minutes, so we're gonna move pretty quickly. Welcome to the audience. Really glad to have you with us. Just a few quick points to make here. So we're going to go through 3 questions, and so we'll spend about 10 minutes on each one. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat, which is right below the video window. We're not going to do Q&A during this session because we want to use this time to get as much out of Jim's brain as we can and hear his thoughts and ideas. But we will do our best to follow up and answer any questions and post them on the website after the webinar. And we are recording it, so you can always come back. It'll be up in a couple days, and we'll send you a link for that. All right, so let's get rolling here. Ready, Jim?
I am ready.
Okay. So let's just say you have a new customer, and you've negotiated a very unique deal with them, because I know you are a good negotiator. And they're going to hire you for one day to complete what we'd say is a small but meaningful project. And if they like the outcome of that project, they're going to give you an amazing contract. So you get to decide what the work is, and they're going to make sure you have all the resources that you need and the people. What are you going to do in that one day?
Education. I'm going to spend one day explaining to them, well, first of all, finding out what their situation is and asking them a ton of questions so that I can find out what they need and how I might help. And if I can't, who else do I know that might be able to help them?
And so let's assume that you've kind of got, all that, and you've got, this one day to actually execute something that they're going to look back and say, yeah, that was a good day. And how would they know that that outcome was good? So whether it's education or something specific that you might do with them, what is that going to look like?
So to prove that I'm a consultant, the answer is it depends. And it depends on what they have said is important to them, what I have determined is important to the people who hold the budget, what I have intuited is important to the CEO. And I'm going to go for the one thing they want. If the one thing that matters to them is subscribers to their newsletter, then we'll work on that. If the one thing that's important to them is improving their data collection and integration pipeline, we'll focus on that. But asking what's the one thing that needs to be done is a combination of what they want and what my skill set is.
Okay.
I'm doing a terrible job of answering your question.
No, actually, so let's focus on that one you said about the data pipeline. So Let's just say that was the thing that they're struggling with. And again, you've got one day, you may not completely overhaul it, but if you've got one day to show that you know what you're doing and something things that folks who are listening in could take away as well and say, okay, I can start working on some things like that. What might that look like?
The first thing I would do is run around and try to identify who the data steward is for each data stream, because how the data is collected and pre-processed and transformed and integrated into the other, into the data lake, is the responsibility of an individual. And I would want to know how comfortable all of those individuals are with their respective data stream. I cannot do a data stream audit for the whole company in one day, but I can find out who the responsible people might be. And what that's going to reveal is where they have gaps in management.
So let's take that. So that's a good start. So let's say you can bring all those people together, and you're sitting down and starting to have some kind of discussion with them. What are some of the things that you might ask them to do? Say you kind of have this one day to get something done, and then you maybe they never invite you back, but you want to make sure that you're able to get them some value. What are some of the things that you would direct those people to do, knowing that they're going to do what you tell them to do?
Step one is flowchart. Classic. Where does the data come from, and where does it go? And what is your confidence level in its cleanliness and reliability and consistency? And what problems are you perceiving with your personal data set? And what problems are you perceiving coming out the other end? What kind of problems do the analysts bring to you when they say, gee, your data set's not helping me out, and it's because it is missing fields, or it's not normalized, or, and with those things, so what is the state of collection and just ETL, and then what is the confidence level, and let's all get together in a group and brainstorm how we might improve where there are problems.
So I'm picturing this kind of matrix of the people, the data sets, and then those handful of variables that you listed out to kind of get a picture of what's there.
And I'm imagining, because I'm not completely COVID converted yet, I'm imagining a whiteboard where everybody is drawing arrows and circles. I guess I should say we'll do a jam board,
right, where
people can create a data flow visually and share it with everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in your experience with that kind of a data governance exercise, just getting it started, is there anything that you've found that's typically fairly common in terms of, wow, that's the kind of thing that we could go fix? Those people could go fix pretty quickly, and it would make a big improvement in where they're at. Is there some kind of small step, low-hanging fruit type thing that you often see?
Oh, it always starts with tagging, right? So how are you collecting the data? And we now have a fair number of decent tools that will help us automate the data quality from the collection point. But I think we need to go back a step first.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest problem I see people having is managing the data that they have rather than the data that will be useful. So the first half of the day, the quote from, I guess it's Abraham Lincoln, if given 4 hours to chop down a tree, he'll spend 3 hours sharpening his axe. So I would want to go to the people who are making the decisions and who are going to rely on the analyst's recommendations to find out what they care about. What are their key performance indicators? What matters? So when we start looking at data streams, we can say, nobody's really looking at social media sentiment in this company. So let's just stop collecting that. We don't need it, and it's taking up resources. Mm-hmm. So if there's anything we can do to trim back the amount of data or the variety of data we're dealing with, that's kind of step one. Let's not try to fix something we don't need.
That's really interesting, because you don't usually hear people say, let's collect less data. Usually it's always about, let's get more. The other thing, just to kind of wrap this question up, because we want to get to these kind of other points, the other thing I heard you say is also this notion of, governance isn't just about organizing it the way you first described it in terms of the kind of this matrix flow chart, but also understanding going forward and really making sure from the business side you've got that input and don't look at it in isolation of just kind of a data exercise. I have a feeling that the way a lot of people think about governance excludes that. So I think that's a really good input for people. All right.
I think we are, as an industry, and I'm pointing the finger directly at myself, are at fault for having started this whole thing by saying, we've got log files. We have more data about marketing than anybody else. We can tell you exactly what's going on. And oh boy, there's a whole bunch of data. Does it mean anything?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of what are our business goals? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the questions we're trying to answer? And then is there any supporting data? And we got off on the wrong foot 20 years ago, and I'm sorry.
Well, everybody point your finger at Jim.
That's right.
I'm sure there's more people we can find to stand in line with you. All right, so let's move on. We've got that was great. I love some of those key points you made. So let's imagine, Jim, you're walking down the street and someone says, hey, there's Jim Sterne. He's the guy who did this to us. No. So you're walking down the street and you find a magic lamp. So you're pretty excited about that, of course, because we all know magic lamps can bring us great things. But this time, it's the evil genie who pops out and says, Jim, I'm going to take away all of your knowledge and skills about analytics, except for one thing. So what is that one piece of knowledge or one skill that you want to keep?
I would have to pick curiosity.
Okay, I'm curious about that answer. Go ahead. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by curiosity and how that plays into what you do.
It's such an interesting question, because the first thing that it causes one to do is, what is my skill set? What am I good at? And I'm good at wondering about things. I'm good at asking questions. And as an outside consultant, the benefit is I can ask really impertinent questions. I can ask the questions that got me in trouble in every job I ever held, which is why I work for myself now. The ability to ask the next question and the next question. It has always been my experience that when I get in a conversation with a stranger about their business, they say, and how long have you been in my industry? No, I'm not. I'm curious. But you seem to know a lot. No, I'm just asking things based on what you told me. If you said A and B, I'm wondering about C, D, and E. And that, I think, is what makes me a valuable consultant. The discoveries that happen, the things that help clients are not necessarily the tactical, can you write a script? Can you build a tech stack? Can you clean my data? But asking them what their business model is. A recent client of mine wanted me to come in and help them create a program of data literacy. It's like, yeah, sure, happy to help. And within a half an hour, I came to a screeching halt because it was clear that nobody in the room agreed on the definition of a qualified lead. And I'm afraid there's just nothing I can help you with until we solve that problem. So all hands on deck. We have to come up with a definition of a qualified lead. What are the stages it goes through, from marketing to sales to customer service? It has to have clear definition that everybody agrees to. And it is taking a couple of months for people to solve that problem.
So did you learn to be curious or somehow get better at being curious? Because I can see where that's critical, not just in kind of the things you described, asking general questions, but when you think about analysis and seeing a potential problem or something that interests you and saying, well, how do I investigate it, right? I talk about it as being a detective and having these, forensic skills.
Yes.
So how do people get it? And obviously this is something you can always get better at. So kind of how did you get good at this or recognize you had the skill, and how do people get better at it?
Well, I think it is a trait to start with. And then how do you exercise it as a skill is a really great question. Probably the biggest lesson I got in that was to withhold a solution. When you're talking to a client and they're telling you what their problem is, and in the back of your mind going, oh yeah, I can fix that. Don't say it.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to fix it, what would be the first three things that you should do? And instead of giving them the answer, ask them questions to see if you're right. Because it's just so empowering to say, yes, I can definitely whip up something that will fix that problem. It's like, well, but wait, let's ask a few more questions. Let's find out who is this important to? What happens if it goes wrong? How did it get this way? How important is it to the company to fix it rather than something else? And it's poking around. It's being a busybody. I sometimes refer to it as corporate therapy. Just get them to talk, because the more they talk, the more you discover, and the better the solution will be that you finally arrive at.
Yeah, that's great. I use this, something I learned a long time ago, that when you're talking with someone, the easy way to remember it is the opposite of silent is listen, right? So it's instead of talking, or not the opposite, but if you rearrange the letters, so that it really helps you think about not just talking a lot, but really soaking in what people are saying and let them have that conversation. So just one more thought about this, then we'll kind of hit the last piece and close up. You said you think it's a trait, and so that actually has me think a little bit concerned. Here's why. So as the world expands and lets more people access data, expects them to have some analytic skill, right? Whether you call it self-service, data literacy, it doesn't matter. And clearly a lot of the world they're not analysts, of course, by business skill, and they may not even be analytical. So what if someone doesn't have the trait, as you say, of being curious to start with, but they're required to think this way and make this part of their work, which I think will be required?
Well, they might want to focus their energies on the areas where they do have talent. We need business decision makers. We need analysts with their curiosity. We need data scientists who can build models. We need data engineers who can build pipelines. We need product managers who can build analytics platforms. And curiosity is going to help everybody in every one of those positions. But if you just like getting the job done, doing the work, then okay, here's a shovel. I need a ditch here. And if you don't have any questions, just dig the ditch. If that's your talent, then do that. But boy, if you're doing plumbing and you're not curious about how it all works and how it was put together and what materials, you're not going to get very far. So how do you exercise curiosity? You keep in the back of your mind to just keep asking questions. And I guess the thing that really helps is people love to talk about themselves. So if you think of it as a gift you are giving when you are asking somebody a question, you're allowing them to reveal themselves, to understand themselves, to share themselves, and you're doing them a favor. You're giving them a gift.
I like that. Good. All right. Interesting. Curiosity. So to close up here, one more. This might be reveal some really interesting things about you personally. So one of the things we're seeing a lot today in analytics, a lot of the focus has been, and innovation, I would say recently, has been on in software in a variety of ways. I believe that while that's going to continue, of course, that for companies to really make the next big leap once they have the software in this kind of using analytics and data. It's really going to be more around people changing their behavior, whether it's how they use data to make decisions or things like how they work across teams or even change the way they do their work. And we know kind of change is hard. Personal change, cultural change tends to be very difficult. Can you share a time when you had to push past your comfort zone in any way around this kind of work? And why was it hard?
Change is always hard. Something new is always hard. I had to, and it's also the mother of invention. I was given a wonderful gift, speaking of gifts, in the last job I had, which was 35 years ago. I couldn't get along with my boss. And I went to his boss and said, we've actually talked about it, almost couples therapy. We don't get along. I like the company. I want to do something. I want to work here. I love the product. Is there anything else I can do? And he said, well, what do you like to do? I said, well, what do you mean? I didn't realize that was on the table. It's work. You pay me to do stuff. It's not like I enjoy this. It's work. Yeah, but when was the last time you actually had fun? You enjoyed the work you were doing. So, well, it was a couple of months ago at the user group meeting when I got up and explained the new features and people had a bunch of questions and everybody was excited and I felt like I was really contributing and I loved being on stage. Oh, so you'd like to be company spokesperson? I said, wow. Yeah. You can't do that here. That's the CEO and the guy that wrote the algorithm. So that's not an option. I said, wow. Then I quit. And today, well, not today because it's COVID time, but I built a company that produces business conferences so I could be on stage and explain things to people. I found something I loved. It was a surprise. It was very difficult calling my wife saying, hi, I just quit my job, and without knowing what I was going to do for a living. But I came into the ability, I recognized what it was I enjoyed, and I made the effort, and that creativity was the fun part. So fast forward to 2020. Back in March of this year, for some strange reason, people stopped buying tickets to my marketing analytics conference at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. And just suddenly sales went to zero.
How about that?
Okay. Necessity is the mother of invention, and I'll have to invent something new. And that I have found to be, after I got over the shock, the horror, the disappointment, all the stages of grief, it was time to get inventive again. So I'm going to do what you're doing. An interview show is brilliant. I'm going to follow suit. Underway on that. I've got a couple other things up my sleeve that I'm going to launch that I am enthusiastic about because we have new constraints, and I have found a way to work within those constraints. And it's difficult, it's awkward, but it's really engaging. It's I'm not just turning the crank anymore. I'm inventing again, and that's exciting.
So it goes all the way back. So where you are today goes back, whatever you said, 35 years to when you had to break out of your comfort zone to talk to your management and ask for something different, and also pushing yourself to think, what would I do? Given the opportunity to have a choice of potentially anything, except then they turned you down for that. But thinking that way, and that's interesting. That I think again today, with the way the world is opening up with data and analytics, and it's exposing more about the company to people, right? Whereas even just a few years ago, maybe it would be something like, Jim, you're not allowed to see that data, right? Now it's changing, in quite a bit, where they're opening it up more, which could create all kinds of opportunities for people to expand what they do, be more curious, right? If they can get into other data that maybe they haven't seen, and maybe take that, I could see that evolving into something like learning something, discovering something, and then bringing that to management or whomever and saying, I figured this out. I think we should, do something with it, and it would be beyond maybe where the kernel of their typical work was, and they would have to go that route. So it's almost like all the things you described during our conversation today could translate into something like that for folks. So thanks for sharing that, and hopefully your wife is hopefully your wife's happy. Everybody's happy that the decision was made, all the way back then. But yeah, things have a weird way of working out that we can't see. I find when you do something that's difficult, you can't know where it's going to take you next year, 5 years.
Everybody will identify with the fact that your biggest steps forward came out of failure or pain or disaster, or something went wrong and forced you to look inside and say, okay, well, what am I going to do about this? What can I do? What skills do I have? Where is my passion? And if your passion is data, the reason that I stay enthused about being an analyst is that data is a tool. And if you have a tool and you can use that tool where others can't, you can help them by using that tool. And I think that this idea of everybody has access to data, not necessarily a good thing. Not everybody understands the data that they're looking at. They can look at the same number and interpret it different ways.
Sure.
And it's the analyst who understands, where does the data come from? How is it processed? Where is it being used? So when it finally hits dashboard and the trend line does a strange thing, they have enough knowledge to go, oh, I see where I should start asking questions, rather than being on the far end of it and just seeing the dashboard and going, oh, that happened, I wonder what that means. So this idea of data democratization is something that has to be handled very carefully. And the analogy that I'm working with this week is the pharmacy. You have a problem, you go into the drugstore, I need a box of Band-Aids. Great, you can take care of that yourself. I have a headache. Yeah, here's a whole row of pain medications. Well, actually, I have really serious pain. Oh, well, there is a pharmacist, and you need to get a prescription from a doctor who actually understands chemistry. And we don't want you to do your own chemistry because you need to be licensed for that.
Right.
And I think if you're an analyst, you have a license to ask deep questions and try to solve those problems. We talk about doctors that as practicing medicine, we are practicing data. And we don't just want everybody to do that by themselves. So I think the analyst will always have a position, regardless of the amount of data or the sophistication of the tools. It's that knowledge that you bring and the curiosity that you bring with it that will keep you employed for the rest of your life.
And I like that idea about, having that skill, but also the permission, giving yourself the permission, and sometimes maybe even having a little bit of extra courage to go a little further than you have in the past with understanding the data and what it might mean. So those are I love how you kind of wrap that all up in that analogy. I haven't heard that one before, but I like that. So Jim, thanks so much for your time today and sharing, some of your personal experiences and letting us a little bit into how you kind of see the world today. Hopefully then the next conference that comes around, we'll all be able to actually buy real tickets and attend in person. That would be that would be wonderful for all of us. And we're going to wrap it up now. Again, folks, we'll get the video up soon. And thanks again. And remember that there's some next week on August 4th, we've got Dan Murray. So I'll make sure you have a link so you can register for that as well and see the whole calendar of folks that we have lined up for August. Enjoy the rest of the day.